Today, we preview the 2025 Seattle Mariners with TJ Mathewson and Lyle Goldstein of the Marine Layer podcast. You're listening to the Bucko Banter podcast, brought to you by the Just Baseball Media Network. Cue the music.
Rockin' 101s, yeah, she compliment my taste. Whiskey in my lemonade, cause I like the way it tastes. Best seats at the Pirates, can they let me run the base? Yeah, my time is like my money, cause I can't afford to waste. Wifey is a lawyer, take my date to my dates. Order steak by the plate, sending case after case. Run my race at my pace, clear the grass of the snake.
Welcome back to another team preview. Today we've got the Seattle Mariners, and we're joined by TJ and Lyle of the Marine Layer podcast. Before we talk Mariners, I just want to thank you both for DeKalen Metcalf, guys. We won't talk too much football, but thank you so much.
You're welcome.
You guys have no gripes or concerns at all about the $150 million extension?
All right, let's talk baseball now. All right.
We were talking a little bit off the air. I feel like this is kind of like the Spider-Man meme in different ways, where similar situations, a little bit different spending, but great pitching staffs, absolutely no hitting whatsoever. So really looking forward to breaking down, see if you guys have the formula to break past what is become the Pirates lineup and the Mariners lineup and kind of bring this team to the next level in the AL West. So let's go through to 2024, see what you added. And I want to get a grade from both of you here. 85 and 77, second in the AL West. You added Donovan Solano, Jorge Polanco, Rowdy Tellez on a minor league deal, a couple other minor league signings. And then via trade, Miles Mastrobuoni, Casey Lugamina, and Austin Shenton. And then you lost Austin Voth, Sam Haggerty, Justin Turner, Jimmy Garcia, and Luis Urias. How are we feeling? Give it a grade. Is this enough?
D-.
Beautiful.
Oh, man. Let's go. Lyle?
I think that was polite, Lyle.
Yeah, I won't hold back. TJ's kind of staying on the nicer side with the D- because we have given this offseason an F. Look, the Mariners, it's well known, right? We were just talking about it with you guys before we got on here. I'm sure anybody that follows baseball knows what the narrative is with the Mariners. Elite starting pitching, need more offense. It was as clear as day. I mean, last year for sure, but really the last couple of years, they had a chance to go out, and nobody's sitting here saying they had to go ink Juan Soto to that $15 million or that 15-year deal. But the Christian Walkers of the world that were out there, or the Ha-Seong Kims that were out there, or the Santanders that were out there, guys that signed for pretty reasonable contracts that were middle of the order bats that the Mariners desperately needed one or two more of, they just balked at it. So look, when I say the offseason grade's an F, that doesn't mean the team's going to be bad. This is a team that has a core in place, that has a couple of really nice offensive pieces with Julio, with Cal Raleigh, with Arozarena. But look, we'll see how the season plays out, but we feel like they absolutely needed a little bit more. That seems to be the general consensus, and they just didn't do it.
And I want to add in as well that I think the Mariners front office at the very least can at least look at their roster and they could say, well, there's a lot of guys here that should be better next year. Julio should be better. Jorge Polanco should be better. Mitch Garver should be better. The platoon at second base should be better than the production Polanco gave there last year. And you want Polanco to be better than the production they got at third base. They cut Ty France, their first baseman, last year about midway through the season. They're hoping the first base platoon they have over there is better. There's a lot of hope that everything gets better. And I think that's how the front office, at least based on how they were handcuffed financially this offseason, would explain their lack of moves. But if you look at it, I guess from a space view, and you look at the owners, the organization from top down, I think what fans wanted to see is in a window that you should be all out to contend. Your goal should be to win the division and should be good to win the World Series. There should at least be some, I'd say, thought that the team is doing everything possible to get better and strive towards that goal. And I don't think any of that want was addressed in the offseason. Not one bit.
Man, I feel like this is Donnie Barrel's erasure right here, guys. No, I thought that Pete Alonso and Christian Walker made a lot of sense for the Mariners. Like, they needed a first baseman. Do you think, I know you mentioned financial restrictions. Do you think there's any truth to the fact that free agent bats are hesitant to sign with Seattle due to the park factors?
That's 100% real. They have a lot of things working against them. It's not just the organization. I think the geography's a real thing. I think the travel's a real thing. I think the climate's a real thing. I think the ballpark's a very real thing. It's almost like a perfect storm of no one ever wanting to come. But it's shown in the past. It's a slightly different era. I'm going to go back to Cano and Cruz at this point, right? But to get those two guys a decade ago to Seattle, the Mariners for Robinson Cano had to go 2 years over the Yankees offer to get him. For Nelson Cruz, they had to go a year over the other team's offers to secure his services in free agency. And those are the two best offensive free agents they have signed, and probably, Lyle, you could tell me if I'm wrong, arguably will ever sign in their franchise history, just based off of the stature of those two guys. It's been shown that, with enough dollars, free agents will look the other way, but this ownership group, that was a different ownership group back then. This ownership group has not shown they're willing to do anything close to that.
No. You guys should look up the Pirates travel schedule and how many miles they travel per year compared to the Mariners, because most fan bases wouldn't think about this sort of thing, but that travel's very real. Like, they're flying 5 hours to Dallas and to Houston multiple times a season for in-division games. Whereas, you look at the Pirates, they go to Chicago, they go to Cincinnati, they go to Milwaukee. They're close trips. That Seattle travel schedule is real. So TJ's right. There are a lot of factors as to why players often opt not to sign in Seattle, and they're very real. But if the Mariners really wanted to go get those guys, they could still go get them. For example, Walker signed for 3 years, $60 million this winter. We talked about him a lot as the perfect fit. The Mariners had done what they did with Nelson Cruz, essentially offered him 1 extra year, given him 4 years for, let's say, $70 to $75 million, and just upped it a bit. Probably gets it done, because I don't think anybody else offered him that. And that's still a pretty reasonable deal. But like TJ said, this ownership group is just totally unwilling to even open up the checkbook to those levels. And that is what has led to an offseason where you only add Donovan Solano as the only new offensive player to the roster.
And why I would say, I don't mean to drag this point on too much longer, guys, but I'd say the thing people also get frustrated at with this ownership group is not only the offseason additions, but then it's like looking towards the future as well, where the selling point of a strategy like this is to sign their own players. And I don't think people are all that confident they're going to sign even their own core up through the next 3, 4, 5 seasons when these guys get into arbitration and they're going on extensions. They've paid. So the Mariners have handed out, this ownership group, 3 big contracts, essentially. They handed out Robbie Ray, who's been traded off the team. His salary's been moved off the books. Luis Castillo, who they've talked about trading this offseason, but nonetheless, they did still hand him a contract, and they paid Julio Rodriguez, whose contract they can't move because there's way too much money on the books. No one else has gotten that, that payday yet. And fans hope, at least in the best case scenario of all of this, is that you can at least pay your own guys. But this offseason hasn't given anyone any confidence they're even going to do that as well, which would be a failure.
With all that being said, how much money do you have to give to Kyle Tucker next offseason to make him a Mariner?
Do you guys know how much I love Kyle Tucker?
That's the only reason I brought it up.
We've seen it.
Oh, good. Well, then let me just bring the bit right here to Bucko Banner.
Yeah,
He's a Mariner. Despite everything we just said, he's simply a Mariner. Money they'd have to give him. Let's go. I don't care what they have to pay Kyle Tucker. 8 years, $285 million, something like that. I'll give him that. What, did I get that wrong?
Did you say 280?
Oh, you think it's going to be more than that?
How about like 4?
Well, maybe he gets that. He is
Contracts now, you don't know.
Yeah.
He is a little bit on the older side. I don't know.
A little bit. How about
hoping for you guys.
Anyways, yeah, I'd give him that number.
Yeah, I'll give him whatever he wants. It's not if it's up to me, he can tell me the number he wants. I'd hand it right to him, and I'll gladly hike up whatever mountain he wants me to hike up. And by the way, I hate hiking, but I'll do it.
Let's go through the projected lineup on Fangraphs here. I want to get your opinion on it. If anyone else cracks this on opening day, Victor Robles in right field, Julio in center, Cal Raleigh behind the dish, Randy Arozarena in left, Luke Raley at first base, Mitch Haniger at DH, JP Crawford at short, Jorge Polanco at third, and Ryan Bliss at second. How are we feeling about this lineup going into opening day? Is there anyone else in spring training or even on the bench that could break the starting 9?
I think you'll see. Well, we'll see what Garver's status is because he just left the game in spring training today after getting hit by a pitch. He's actually a guy that's had a really good spring, despite what was a really, really tough year last year, like career worst year or close to it. He's had a good spring, and it seems like he's bouncing back a bit. And if he figures some things out and gets back to being closer to the guy who he was supposed to be when the Mariners signed him, I think you'll see him get a lot more of the DH at bats than Haniger. So I would say him. And then at second base, I think you'll see a lot of Dylan Moore play second base along with Ryan Bliss. That's probably going to be a platoon for the most part. So you'll see those guys a decent bit. Other than that, I don't think there's any huge names that are going to crack the opening day roster right away. They'll have some prospects coming up through the pipeline throughout the year, but on March the 27th, probably not.
How about
I think they're just in the process right now of figuring out reps, as Lau mentioned, most of those positions. I think there's really 4 positions where you could see at least a little bit of shuffling throughout the season: third, second, first, and DH. I think there's one bench spot that they're going to try and feel some things out this spring. They've been shuffling a lot of guys around the entire lineup this spring to try and get some looks. For example, Luke Raley's supposed to be their opening day first baseman, but Lau and I went back and counted. He's only started at first base in 2 of the 19 spring training games they've played. 2 games. So they're trying to find, they're trying to give some other guys looks at other positions. Most importantly, or I'd say most relevant to this conversation, former Pirate Rowdy Tellez has been getting some real looks at first base. I'm thinking they're trying to decide whether or not they think his bat's worth being on the big league roster or not. They've certainly given him a lot of runway for that. But it's just guys like that, I think, would be the only real surprise. I'd be like slightly surprised if Rowdy made it. But the starting lineup, for the most part, unless someone gets hurt, is set.
How long until we see Pittsburgh's very own Cole Young? And I mean, he's a big prospect. He was a first-round pick for you guys out of North Allegheny High School, like maybe 10 minutes from the city here. He's an exciting guy. Is he going to replace J.P. Crawford at some point?
He's going to be a second baseman. I don't think he's going to be the one replacing J.P. Crawford. J.P.'s an interesting case in terms of his future beyond this season, but I don't think Cole Young's the guy who's going to be taking his spot. The Mariners, as up and down as J.P. Crawford's been for his career, second base has just been a black hole of ineptitude since Robinson Cano left. So if Cole Young, who's projected as a second baseman now, comes up and just fills that second base spot in June, I'll say, I think June's a good spot for Cole Young to come up and play in the Mariners season. I think that would make the most sense at this point.
Yeah, and let me add this too quickly. There was a little bit of thought, outside chance, but a little bit of thought, if he just absolutely exploded in spring training, that maybe he'd crack the roster on opening day. He's been hampered down a little bit. He had like a sore throwing arm for a bit, so he wasn't playing the field for a while, and it wasn't serious, but they were just trying to ease him in and not take anything too over the top in spring training. But that being said, I don't think it's going to be long before the Mariners see him. He's absolutely in their plans in 2025. He's going to start the year in AAA. And yeah, June's probably a good timeline, like TJ mentioned, but if it's May 1st or May 5th, I wouldn't be that shocked either. It's not going to be long. Let's put it like that. And once he gets up, yeah, he's going to really, really be a part of their plans.
Nice. Let's go through the rotation real quick. Right now, we're going into this projected rotation with George Kirby sidelined, right? I don't know how serious it is for him, but we've got Logan Gilbert, Luis Castillo, Bryce Miller, Brian Rue, and Emerson Hancock. This organization has been able to develop pitchers under Andy McKay and their player development system. Sort of like the Pirates, very similar. What do we think about this rotation? And do you see it shaping up any differently than how I just listed it out for you guys?
That's right. And we could see some appearances later in the season, depending on need, depending on injury, from a couple of our favorites, Brandon Garcia and Logan Evans. Those guys pitched last year at AA. Brandon was co-minor league pitcher of the year alongside another guy, Michael Morales. The whole AA rotation has been very good. And I think there's an opportunity for those guys to get up and see some time in the Mariners rotation this year. But otherwise, Hancock's the number 6 guy. He's going to be between there and in AAA Tacoma all season. That's been kind of, unfortunately, due to timing and sequencing of this rotation, just his spot. He's one of our favorite dudes. He's one of the nicest people on planet Earth. But unfortunately, there's just no room for him to start. And he is a starter. He's not a reliever. He is a 100% starter. So he's going to be there to fill in if guys get injured. The thing to look at this year with the Mariners rotation is they only used 7 starters all of last year, 7 total all season long. It's unlikely that's going to be the case again this season. Therefore, that's what makes guys like Emerson Hancock that much more important. But in terms of expectation, yeah, this should be the best rotation in baseball again. I'd be disappointed if they're not.
Especially because the Kirby thing's not too serious. Basically, the trainers and the coaches had to yank the ball out of his hands. He was trying to tell him, no, like, I want to keep pitching. I threw 98 in my first outing in spring training. I can work through this. They're like, no, like, we're not taking the risk this early. It sounds like he'll probably just miss a couple starts to open the year, but they'd rather have him for 28 to 30 starts for 6 months rather than let this inflammation thing linger on all year. So they're just taking precaution now.
Let's talk bullpen. Closer, Andres Munoz, Colin Snyder, Gregory Santos, Trent Thornton, Taylor Saucedo, Seth Martinez, Gabe Spire, Carlos Vargas. Sorry if I butchered some last names there. Any other guy in this group that you could see either not making the team or somebody in spring training that's going to contribute to the ever-rotating door that is a major league bullpen?
Tully Felice.
Yeah, Natali
There we go. Fit in any bucket you can.
Thread.
Did you guys know that Neftali Feliz is currently 2 years away from being eligible for the 2027 Hall of Fame? So he's in camp, but if he doesn't pitch in any big league games, he's going to be on the Hall of Fame ballot in like 2 years.
That's amazing.
He's thrown 5 big league innings in the last 7 seasons or something like that.
A couple of them were with the Pirates for sure. I know that.
Yeah. Unreal. I would say the big key for the Mariners in terms of either names not mentioned or just other guys to add on. You mentioned most of them. Obviously, Munoz is the alpha in this bullpen. They're waiting on Gregory Santos to, he missed most of last year. Now he's healthy. Obviously, they're hoping he turns into the guy they traded for in Chicago, where he was dynamite for 1 year for the White Sox. So those two. And then the key is they expect to get Matt Brash back in late April, who, when that guy's on, he's one of baseball's best relievers with maybe the most disgusting pitch in that sweeper. So that's going to be a big key. Look, the offense is going to be talked about night and day, 7 days a week. It's the storyline of the team. Are they going to hit? That being said, if this bullpen had Matt Brash last year, we might have been talking about a different Mariners team, because this bullpen had a lot of issues last year with a lot of guys getting overworked late in the year, and there was no Brash to, supplement a lot of that. And I think with him being back this year, you'll see a difference.
There's a couple more options for the Mariners to fill. I'd say the back end of their bullpen. I think as of counting, they have about 1 spot available in that bullpen. Not too much variance based off of who they choose. I think it just depends on preference and handiness and repertoire. But I think the biggest story of the Mariners bullpen, it's not it will. Let me rephrase myself because I'm talking too fast. So they weren't good enough last year. Definitely were not. Going into this year, and they're expecting to be better. They're expecting to have some bounce back from guys. I think of someone like Gabe Spire, for example, not a household name in Major League Baseball, but he was huge for the Mariners 2023 bullpen, which was dynamite. They had multiple guys that they plucked off the waiver wire who turned in full great seasons out of that bullpen, and they didn't get that really last year. And Gabe's a guy who's bounced back at spring this year. He's been throwing a lot harder, and his stuff just looks a lot better. So just an example like that of guys they expect to bounce back. But the biggest story in the Mariners bullpen is that as nasty as Andres Munoz is, he might have just created his nastiest pitch. He create is actually the wrong word. He started throwing a kick changeup off of his.
Seems like everybody's throwing one this offseason.
Yeah.
And this thing, I mean, this is one of the nastiest pitches I've ever seen. He threw it in a game for the first time on yesterday.
Gross.
And oh my God, it sits like 91, 93. Jeez. At its peak, it drops 10 inches. I mean, oh my God.
Yeah, we saw it in person. It was pretty wild.
This dude 2 years ago in 2022, or 3 years ago, I guess technically now, his slider was one of the best pitches in all of baseball. Not his fastball, as his slider was. And now he has a pitch that can be better than that slider was. It's just mind-blowing.
Boys, let's talk prospects. I'm a big prospect guy. There's a lot of exciting names in this system. We already talked about Cole Young, but who are some other guys that you're really excited to follow this year who could make a big impact? A name that I really like in this system is Johnny Formello. Mm-hmm. Talk me off of him if you can, if you want.
No, he's got a chance to be a stud. Now,
Yeah.
he's not going to start playing till midseason. Unfortunately, he tore his ACL last year. So he's working his way back from that. But the thought seems to be across the industry that the Mariners got a steal at 29 when they drafted him in 2023, because they seem to think he can legitimately play center field, runs well, has significant power. They really, really like him. So is he going to take a little bit to develop? Sure. But are we excited to follow him once he gets back and going this year? Absolutely. This guy, again, we'll see how long Julio's in center field for. The way he plays defense out there, it could be a very long time. But once Farmelo gets to the show, if he continues to do everything that he's projected to do, yeah, they're going to have a decision to make at some point with where they're going to place Farmelo, because he's supposed to be a really good defender with significant power. But I think the person everybody has circled is Colt Emerson. Aram just put him at 9, by the way, in just baseball's newest top 100 prospect rankings, which for everybody that hasn't checked those out yet, you absolutely should. Aram kills it with those lists every year. He is a guy where he's so exciting because he feels, despite being a high school prospect, almost a safe prospect, because he's such a good bat to ball guy and he doesn't really have a bunch of defensive deficiencies. Not that he's going to be a Gold Glover, but he's a safe defender. He's got a safe offensive profile with a ceiling that projects real power. And it's unfair to throw comps on guys, but when he was drafted and people started to see the way he was hitting for power once he got into pro ball, there was some Corey Seager comps thrown around with the height and the left-handed swing and the way he moves. So I don't want to put that on Colt, obviously just being 19, but he's absolutely the best prospect in the system, and there's nobody I'm more excited to follow.
And it might not be very close. Fun fact about Colt Emerson. So the last week or so in spring training, he's gotten really comfortable at the plate. It's shown he's been hitting the ball incredibly hard. He had a homer at 112 this past weekend. Just an insane swing and an insane ball that went over the fence at Sloan Park against the Cubs. You know how many professional games total he's played? This is a question to all three of you, because I was looking it up today.
I probably have the best chance to answer this, because he missed a decent amount of time last year too. I'm going to say 70.
107 games.
Oh, okay.
And he's the number 9 prospect in baseball, and he's facing big leaguers in big league camp and looks totally comfortable. And that is rare. Jared Kelenic, former Mariners top prospect, was not this far along 107 games into his development. Julio was not this comfortable 107 games into his professional career. It's pretty unique. Not going to say he's not guaranteeing anything, but he's so exciting to watch.
What about a pick to click, guys? Who's going to help take this Mariners team to the next level in 2025?
I got a couple of different ones. Unless you have an answer, TJ. I mean, I'll let you go first and then kind of pick a different one if you've got something.
So the question, who would make the biggest difference?
Yeah, who could be a big contributor this year? Maybe that's not on everybody's radar, but a breakout guy that's really going to help push this team to the next level.
Well, he gets talked about the most. I'm just going to say Julio, because it's not your under the radar pick, but legitimately no one has a bigger impact on the success of the Seattle Mariners than Julio Rodriguez does. Even if they signed, actually, I'll throw that out. If they signed Juan Soto, would make just as big of an impact. But nobody else they could have brought in probably since Julio debuted as a free agent, as a trade, would make the kind of impact that Julio makes when he's on this team. There's a massive gap in his production between when they win games and when they lose games. And it's just, it's not just a coincidence that when he's slumping, the team doesn't play as well. And that's happened each of the last 2 years. And it's been a really big factor of why they haven't made the playoffs. It's because for months on end, Julio's just somewhere else. He's gone. He's disappeared at this point. He'll show up at the end of the season and he gets really hot. And when he's that hot, they win a ton of games. But it's unfortunately just not good enough for the entire season sample that they need of him to be successful and make the playoffs. Think of the difference. He's played 3 years in his career. The 1 year he was the most consistent, 2022, he had a terrible start to the season, and then he had 5 excellent months to finish to win American League Rookie of the Year. They made the playoffs. The offense was good. There were some complaints, but for the most part, Julio is someone you could rely upon throughout the season. The next 2 seasons, people were sitting there watching like, what's up with Julio? What's going on? That question, I don't think can be asked again this year if the Mariners are going to be successful.
It's a great answer because this offense goes as Julio goes. And it's a guy that's been buoyed by months so far in his career rather than seasons. But if I'm going to pick somebody else, I'll go with Jorge Polanco because when he was traded to Seattle last year, he was expected to be the second best bat on the team behind Julio. This is a guy that for years on end in Minnesota was one of baseball's best offensive second basemen. In 2023, he was a well above average offensive second baseman. But all of a sudden last year, he gets to Seattle. He'd been in one organization his whole life with the Twins, and he really, really just had a tough year and never seemed to really get it going. I have a hard time believing at 30 years old, he's just falling off a cliff. He is on the older side. Again, 31 doesn't move great. I'm not saying he's 24, but 31 is also not old. There's plenty of free agents that get massive deals at age 31. So I think for Polanco, if he can bounce back and he's more the guy they expect him to be, that's a massive difference for the Mariners because he is so much better than what he showed last year.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Another guy I really like this year as a breakout for the Mariners is Bryan Woo, because I think if he's healthy, this rotation is just deeper than it already is. So that's a guy to watch out for this year. But guys, before we let you go, can you give us a 2025 prediction? Could be player oriented or even team oriented, like a season ending result.
Sure, Scott, I'll go off what you just said because Bryan Woo is my favorite guy in the rotation. It's so hard to pick a favorite because all five, when they're on, are just awesome. Woo's my favorite. So if you want a prediction off that, he's going to stay healthy this year, and you're going to see Bryan Woo pitching in Atlanta in the All-Star game. That's mine.
That's tough. So I'll do a season prediction then. I'll do a record prediction. I think this team wins probably similar to what they did last year. I'll say 86 wins. And unfortunately, at this point, I'm going to say they missed the playoffs right now.
Okay.
Might change after I watch April and see how they play. But as of right now, it just kind of feels like you finished behind one of the two Texas teams.
Right. This is the time of the year you just got to drink the hopium, man. You just got to. Everyone's in the best shape of their life. Come on.
I've spent a lot of time as a Mariner fan, and I've drank way too much hopium to.
Have the two of you stamped a Pirates 97 win prediction yet off the hopium?
No.
Ooh,
No.
97.
77 would be an increase from last year. So let's go with that.
Guys, we appreciate you coming on, part of the Just Baseball Media Network. You do fantastic work. Where can our listeners find you at?
You can find us everywhere. Apple, Spotify, YouTube, all your social media platforms, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter. It's at Marine Layer Pod everywhere. If you search on the podcast, it's Marine Layer Podcast. And yeah, if you're online, you can find us somewhere.
Love that.
Awesome.
Love that. Appreciate you guys. We definitely look up to both you joining the Just Baseball Network. So continue the great work, and hopefully we can do this in person sometime soon.
Yeah.
Appreciate it,
Scott,
guys.
Yeah, Scott, Adam, this was a blast. Can't wait to do it again.
Thanks, guys.
Best seats at the Pirates game, they let me run the base. Yeah, my time is like my money, cause I can't afford to waste. Wifey is a lawyer, take my date to my dates or the steak by the plates and it